Welcome everyone to Almost Cancelled. I am Peter, and today I'm going to be talking about episode 1 of We Own This City, the new HBO limited series. Most of the pilots I cover here, it ranked high on the pilot vote on Patreon, over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. So this is the new HBO limited series, which has some cred behind it because it comes from some of the same people who were behind The Wire. And that is, I see a trailer for a cop show and that's type of genre. I tend not to be that enthusiastic about it because there's tons of them. Most of them kind of fall into the same kind of tropes or cheesy sort of stuff. But when you tell me it's from people like David Simon, because The Wire is so freaking fantastic and it's such a dense show with themes and with ideas, and it's got a lot of things to say about the world and about the police justice system and all these other things, I'm a bit more interested. So I was glad that this ranked high in the pilot vote. It is only 6 episodes, and it is based on a non-fiction book chronicling events from late 2015 up until at least 2017, maybe even, I don't know if it goes beyond that, but certainly in this first episode we get events from 2015 and 2017, so presumably we're going to be dealing with largely that time frame. And right away you get the idea this is going to be talking about police brutality. It's going to talk about the police system, holding officers accountable for what they do, the attitudes of those officers and why they do the things they do, the way the criminal system works, all these things. There's a lot of scenes in this episode of people filming the police arresting and beating people up, things like that. So the subject, the episode starts with this kind of speech. It's John Bernthal who plays one of our main characters, Wayne Jenkins, and I'm going to have to check the character names because the episode does a great job of making me remember who all the key players are, but I wouldn't say it does a good job of making me learn their names. There's one name that's repeated a lot, and then everyone else, I know who John Bernthal is, I understand his role in the story and kind of where we're going with it, as much as I can without really knowing the non-fiction book or a lot of the events that this is based on. But that opening scene with John Bernthal's character, he is giving a lecture to some rookie police, talking about how much violence they should use when they're on the streets. And this scene's very much a thesis for what the whole show is going to be talking about. The way he looks at quote-unquote brutality, does he agree with that term? When is it justifiable? All these things, they sort of are baked in there, and it's a very well written scene. It's very quick. There's a lot of quick dialogue coming out of his mouth, and Bernthal's probably perfectly cast in this role. He kind of has that tough, thinks he knows best attitudes. Really there. It's he's always kind of had that, but this really suits him, this role. So it's nice that he gets to be in something with the writing and kind of the depth that something from the creators of The Wire would lean to. So this is obviously a first episode, so I will keep this as spoiler light. If I have to give some spoiler stuff later on, I'll give you warning, but I'll keep it spoiler light just now. I'll just say that the writing quality and the directing quality are really strong. The writing especially. I mean, the directing's good. I think the directing is very reserved in that there's a couple of really strong sequences from a directing point of view sprinkled throughout, particularly the opening and the ending of the episode, are really well done. The opening, the way it's cutting around as John Bernthal's giving his speech, and the way it ends, it's kind of the thesis before the opening titles hit, is all very well done, and there's natural tension being built through these characters that we barely know yet, and it's really effective. And in a similar light, there's a moment towards the end where we don't really have all the context. That the episode doesn't necessarily overly explain everything. It gives us enough to follow some things, but clearly there's a bigger picture that's gradually being built as it's going on. It's very dense. But when you get to the end of the episode, there's a moment where John Bernthal's character is just walking into a building, and it's really tense and foreboding, despite the fact that we don't really have a lot of context for why it should be tense and foreboding. You just sort of get a feeling from it, and it works really well. And those were the 2 moments in particular that stood out for me from a direction point of view. But there's all little touches throughout, don't get me wrong, but it's not afraid to just have a simple scene of 2 people talking to each other just be that. It doesn't have to do anything fancy whilst it's letting the actual text, if you will, do the talking. So direction is really strong. Writing is pretty exceptional. It's one of those things where it feels uber researched. It feels like, like I'm sure if someone who knows the system could probably point out little shortcuts they might have taken to make it fit into a 6-episode limited series and speed things up and whatnot. But if you don't have that special knowledge, this feels authentic when you're watching. Like all these little details, the way some of the officers are talking to each other, the way that some of these subjects are coming up, it feels very natural and grounded in a way that The Wire also kind of achieved. That's what that show was very good at as well. And presented the idea that there's good and bad characters and just about every side of every conflict, and you do like that kind of idea where we're exploring some people within the system who are trying to make it better, who are trying to look at why there's so much brutality and why there's so few actual genuine arrests being made, and the climate that's going on because of some prior incidents that are brought up in the episode. There's all these things like sort of bubbling throughout, and you've got this kind of investigative approach. So John Bernthal, he is like this character who clearly is going to be involved in some of the stuff, and by the end of the episode it makes it clear that he is being investigated for doing stuff whilst operating as a police officer, and his task force that he runs. But another main character, an actress who and there's a bunch of like faces from The Wire who do pop up in this, but there's some of the other major characters. You have Wumi Musaku, if I'm pronouncing her name right. She was the big sister on Lovecraft Country and was recently in something else. What was the other thing she was in recently? I can't remember, but she was a big sister on Lovecraft Country. She is an attorney with the Civil Rights Department of Justice, or the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice, I should say. And she's going around in late 2015 investigating. They've been brought in because of a prior incident, a real incident. I did look this up because I wasn't super familiar with this one just by the mention of the name, but Freddie Gray was the victim who was killed by police in 2015. And this has kind of like got this ball rolling where the mayor's asked for help to look into this side of their system. What's interesting watching these parts of the episode is that it very much it references the climate at the time. It's late 2015, so there's comments about the upcoming presidential election and who might win and who's silly, he'll never win, and I think why it doesn't feel like a cheap reference to time it's more because of because that's going to have an impact on how they look into this, because it's going to trickle down through all the departments, whatever the current policies are and things like that. So it feels like it's relevant to what they're talking about, which is why it does come up. So, but it was kind of like it was just like a moment. I was like, oh yeah, it's 2015 right now, because the episode is very much bookended, where it starts in 2017 and it sets up some of the principal characters. And then through an interview that our two sort of FBI agents are having with a prisoner who turns out actually to be a cop, who turns out to be an ex-cop, who we see when we go back to 2015 to the time he's talking about. He's not there as soon as we flash back, but he does pop up eventually in the 2015 section, and then all the sort of, some things start to tie together a little bit by the end. And then it kind of, we know we're back in 2017 again because it cuts back to this interview with the two FBI agents and this character. So it does a good job of doing that. It sort of confirms it, because it does this thing where it goes to a computer screen. It's like someone's putting in log entries or something, or they're looking up files or whatever, and they're dating it, so you can sort of see it that way. But even before you get to that point, these two FBI agents interviewing someone kind of lets you know, we're in this part of the time period again. So, and there's a lot of characters sort of going around. So like I say, you've got the attorney going around talking to the mayor, working with a new lawyer who's just joined her team in her plot, looking at the statistics, looking at how many officers are having complaints against them for brutality, how many are walking, how many of these things aren't going through to court, that kind of thing. And then you've got an investigation over an overdose. There's a drug going around that's overdosing some people, and this is outside of Baltimore, where most of the show is set. and it's the cops investigating that and tailing suspects and looking into it, which at first feels very separate from everything else that's going on, other than a few thematic links. But then it kind of ties into another character eventually, and you can sort of see this tapestry starting to come together. And it's not like a tapestry in the way, in a lot of TV shows that are start from a place of just complete fiction. You have this tapestry because you want to build mystery and because you want to seed things, and maybe if you have supernatural or science fiction elements, you want to like sort of build what all that is, and you sort of tease little bits here or there. This is different than that. This is more like, no, this is based on the real world, where there's a lot of intertwining connections of characters, and as time goes on, you're going to see them start to sort of come. And part of it is narrative choice. Part of it is like, we're not going to show that these two characters have met until this moment, because it's going to, like, if you don't know the story, it's going to hit you at that moment. Oh, these characters are related in some way. That suddenly recontextualizes what they're both up to or something. There's moments like that. And I think that's probably going to keep building, at least for a bit. Maybe not right until the end, because presumably by the time we get to the end of the 6 episodes, they'll established everything so well by that point that we'll just be dealing with the conclusion to everything. But yeah, it's really impressive. Like, because I watch an episode like this, and I feel like if you just told me what this was about, I'd probably say it sounds dry, but it isn't. It really isn't, and I think this is why these types of topics don't tend to appeal to me as much, because it tends to be, I don't know, either too glossy because they're ramping it up for TV, or because I want the emotional side of things. I prefer a show that will actually let the emotional side of things kind of come to the first, because a big part of enjoying characters and writing is connecting with those characters and actually feeling the impact on them. And sometimes when you get these more kind of grand statement types of narratives where it's like, no, we're going to like look at everyone and it's going to build a big picture, but we're not necessarily going to have an emotional moment where you get music coming in as a character finds out someone's died or so on, so on. It's not doing that. It wants to feel very almost docu style in the way it's kind of objectively, and that's not to say that it is completely objective. It's not. It is still, it is an narrativization. That's not a word. You know what I'm trying to say. It's been turned into a narrative, right, that works in a TV format, and it feels like it's being true to everything it's doing. But at the same time, there are little things that you're doing with the way you're choosing to edit it, the way you're choosing to move the camera. You're trying to take the audience through these scenes and sort of make a statement with each one that says, in some cases it might be, isn't it crazy that this happens, or isn't it crazy that this person does this? And you naturally sympathize with a character in the scene in a more kind of like down-to-earth human way, as opposed to in a traditional narrative with a hero and a villain, where it's more about kind of really tapping into the dopamine parts of your brain and kind of making you scared, and then root for success, and then the swoop in and the we can all feel relieved because someone saved the day. This is very much not that, and I tend to like the other thing more. And the reason why I tend to like the other thing more is because there's more creativity, generally speaking, to it. I think what David Simon and co are so good at with their take on these subjects is that I think it's a balance of the attention to detail, how real and natural it all feels, and just like this unrelenting kind of determination to really make everything feel like it has weight. Like everything feels like every single conversation has a purpose. Every single conversation is adding to the themes. Every single conversation is building part of the story of the characters. Every single conversation is part of the statement of the whole show. Not a single word feels wasted. And that is impressive. You feel like you're in very good hands. They're very different hands than, to say, a Vince Gilligan who's doing Better Call Saul, but you still feel like you're in very, very strong hands. That's just a very different genre of storytelling. And this is a genre of storytelling where only the absolute best of the best works for me, because anything less than that, then all the things that I don't typically like about it, because all the other things I like about storytelling aren't there, like it becomes more of a problem. But when it comes to The Wire, and by extension the first episode of this, which I would say falls into this as well, I don't feel that. Like, it's good enough, it doesn't matter. Like, and I'm like this with lots of genre, even just like gangster movie. I'm not a gangster movie person, but ultimately The Godfather's still great because it's just that good. It's just that great. It needs to be the exceptional kind of it. So when I sit down and recommend something like We Own This City, I am saying that the sheer quality of writing, direction, and the narrative intent is just so strong that it overcomes any kind of preconceptions you have about what the sort of subject this is dealing with is. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that I don't usually like cop shows. It doesn't matter that I normally don't like crime shows. It doesn't matter. So yeah, I guess what I'm saying is I recommend We Own This City. It's just very good. The first episode is very good. It's only 6 episodes, so it's definitely well worth giving a chance, especially if you've liked any of the prior work of David Simon. I will say, I'll just say minor spoilers here a little bit. Here, just I want to talk about just one particular line, because I mentioned the ending of the episode. I just want to mention the ending again with a little bit more spoiler to it. Is there's a moment where the police commissioner goes in to see Bernthal's character, Wayne Jenkins, after he's been arrested. And he wants to go in and speak to him or see him before the FBI agents go in. And we've been seeing these FBI agents question this other guy, who used to be a cop. And he goes in first. He doesn't say anything to him. He just goes in and stares at him. And John Bernthal just stares at him without blinking. And when he walks out and he lets the FBI agents in, he turns to the other guy there, the other cop, and just says, "The rest of them all looked away, but not him." And it really it builds up that he is the main focus. That the idea that he's so sure of himself and what he does, and not feeling guilty, all that kind of thing. Like, that is going to be a big part of this. And it also means he's going to be the toughest nut for these FBI agents to crack. He's going to be all these things. It really sells up the battle for truth, I guess. The battle of the rest of the story is really going to be against him. And the first episode does a wonderful job of establishing who he is through a few key sequences, his attitude on things, how confident he is. It's really well done. So I would recommend We Own This City, especially if you enjoyed The Wire or anything like that before. Obviously, The Deuce is a little bit different, but very much still in the very well regarded, highly written series that he's done for HBO. No, he's alone, but he's the name that I recognize, and he's the name that I'm going to bring up because of that. And the cast are, very natural. There's some good performances in here. I do think Misako, it's interesting to see her in this role, because I've seen her in very different roles. It's interesting to see her in this kind of, wearing a business suit and going to these meetings where she's being diplomatic and sort of reacting very subtly to what she's been told, between the lines. There's a scene where she's talking to the mayor, and the mayor says she's stepping down. And there's just a little reaction, and she clarifies it in the next scene when she's talking to the guy she's with, what that means. That's this kind of like, oh, she asked for people like us to come in and help with this crisis, but now she's stepping down, and it's going to be a new mayor who has to actually put up with us and all the problems that that's going to bring. So, but you can see her reaction in the moment. Like, at the moment where she says she's stepping down, I was like, she's looking right at her. It's a really good little piece of acting, and I think it just stuck out to me because I've seen this actress be very good in other things, but this is a very different type of character than her character on Lovecraft Country or whatever else I saw her in, which I'm really, it's bugging me that I'm forgetting what else I saw her in. But yeah, so yeah, she's good. You've got obviously a whole host of characters playing various cops. Some obviously corrupt, some seem to be better. There's one that's mentioned a lot throughout the episode. Hazel, he's like the one name that I kind of picked up because they mention it a bunch of times, and we see him harassing people, abusing his power, acting all tough in front of people. He hits a guy in the back of the head just because he dropped an F-bomb on him and claims that he was being hit and he was defending himself. And it's all very blatant, and that's kind of one of the big things that the show's clearly getting at, is just how blatant a lot of this is and how much no one seems to care. They think that they can talk their way out of anything after the fact. It doesn't matter. And it's kind of this realization of just how safe everyone feels they are to just keep doing this kind of thing. And it's very much, in a lot of ways, like, it's not anything like, say, Chernobyl, the limited series that they did about that. And I say they had been HBO a couple of years ago, but it has one thing in common with that, which is kind of that constant feeling of like anger, of like, why has this been allowed to happen? Why is this okay? And it's obviously they're very different situations, they're very different topics and all those things, but I remember getting angry at that and a lot of that show because of people's attitudes. Like, this was a real set of events that we're portraying here, and this is, well, obviously some things have changed, some things have moved around a little bit to make it work in the context of a 5-episode TV show. Fundamentally, the attitudes that are being portrayed here are based on very real attitudes about covering things up, about downplaying how big things are, how dangerous things are. And with this, it's kind of the same thing, where you're constantly just getting a little angrier about the attitude that people have, about what people think they can get away with what people seem to be willing to let pass, and all of these different things. And it's that's why it's called We Own This City, right? It's this the title. When I read that title, what I'm assuming I'm hearing is an arrogant cop saying, this is our city and we control these streets and we can do whatever we want. That's what I'm hearing from that title. So this episode does a good job of sort of saying, this is what we're talking about. This is what this is. And it's good because it's funny because I see, if I see any trailer now for a cop show, my first thought is, oh, I don't know if this works anymore in quite the same way, because I think by and large people's opinions, because of incidents that have happened, forever really, but in terms of like being filmed, that they've been in the last decade, attitudes are a little bit different. And we don't necessarily want, people call it propaganda or whatever, like those phrases get used. The last season of Brooklyn Nine-Nine, they ditched like several scripts and started rewriting because they felt like they had to do something different with it. So when I see a trailer for just a sort of cop show, I tend to think, I don't really know if I want to watch a couple of cops go around and be heroes or whatever. But that's not what this is. Obviously, this is a very critical, hard look at what's wrong with the system and some of the people in it. And it's obviously very dense because of that. It is not pulling any punches necessarily. And if you want to watch something that will actually challenge you and be informative and explore a topic which more people probably need to be in some level aware of, I would recommend We Own This City, based on the first episode. I have no reason to suspect why the rest of it wouldn't live up to what this first episode has done. So yeah, there you go. That is the first episode of We Own This City. Let me know what you think of the show in the comments below. Like, subscribe, ding the bell for notifications, all that stuff. And of course, if you want to support everything that we do on the channels, head over to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV, and you can support us over there for as little as $1 per month. But thank you very much for watching or listening. I always appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?